The Constitutional Court ruling for Nkosana Makate, the inventor. Was he the inventor? The originator. Let's call it the originator, because he kind of came up with the idea of please call me, went to his boss and said, hey, I've had an idea. And then the engineers really invented it. Call me a nitpicker, but let's be specific. He's been lauded as a win for the little guy, but behind Makate was the might of litigation financiers Sterling Rand. You don't pick a fight with a company the size of Vodacom of 250 billion Rand and expect to win unless you've got some money in the background. These are litigation financiers in South Africa. This is the MoneyMakers. I'm Bruce Whitfield. Tonight I'm joined by Errol Elsdon, who is director at Sterling Rand Litigation Fund, to talk about a growing industry and the sort of investors it attracts. And if you've had a bright idea, which at the cocktail party at Christmas time you mentioned to your boss, they've acted on it and you've lost out, can you make a buck or two? Let's just look at Please Call Me quickly, because 15 years ago, bright young accountant goes off to somebody, to his boss, and says, you know what, can't get hold of my girlfriend. How about something, we send an SMS and then they know I'm trying to get hold of them. They can phone me even if I don't have airtime. Really good idea. Mm-hmm. And it went from there.
That was where it originated. And the concept was taken to Kenneth Makate's bosses at Vodacom, and they took it in turn to their bosses, and they deemed it to be a good idea. And the discussions took place whereby they would implement it, and if it was technically and commercially viable, they would roll the program out.
And at some point, a commitment was made to give him something.
Indeed. When he took the concept to the product director, they discussed reward, and Kenneth asked that he be given 15% of the turnover on the product that the product generated, and that was the deal that he negotiated with the product development director.
Anything in writing?
No. It was all done orally, and a commitment was made in writing by the product development director to say that if it was successful, he would negotiate with Kenneth in good faith, and he would, if they were unable to reach agreement, he would take the dispute, if you like, to Alan Craig.
Who was then
the CEO.
That's right. Executive. So the 15% isn't in writing anywhere.
No.
Which is why the Constitutional Court, in its ruling in favour of Mr. Makate, said it should be an amount deemed to be fair by the chief executive of Vodacom. It's a little bit like going to the Hyenas Convention and saying, you guys, here's the carcass, you split up what's there. Hyenas aren't known for sharing very well, are they?
Indeed, and that point was made by Vodacom's counsel in the Constitutional Court, when they referred to the request for 15% as being greedy. And his lordship, the Deputy Chief Justice, Nkosana, said, well, isn't that what negotiation's all about? You start up there, and they start down here, and you meet somewhere in the middle.
Now, how do you work? Because you clearly spotted an opportunity. You saw a David in the face of a Goliath. You saw a case that you believed you could win. And on behalf of Mr. Makate, you've invested money in a case.
Indeed, and that's the very nature of litigation financing. We would identify a particular case, we'd assess it. If we liked it, we'd then take it to our in-house attorneys, who would then seek the opinion of counsel. And if they deemed there was a good prospect of success, we would take the matter on and finance it.
Well, how do you get to find out about the cases? We know of the lawyers who hang around in hospital emergency rooms. They're called ambulance chasers.
Yes.
Are you a bit like the ambulance chasers? Do you hang around in courtroom corridors looking for opportunities?
Not at all. We find people come to us. They find us. And invariably we'll only take a case on that has a substantial quantum and that there is a substantial defendant at the end of the line. There's no point litigating, winning and finding the cupboard is bare.
Yeah. But how do you then assess the validity of a claim like this? All you've got is a letter from a product development manager to somebody who's come to him. and that holds up in a court of law. It's an extraordinary precedent by South African standards, surely, in terms of who actually owns intellectual property.
Well, the court accepted that the originator of the idea was Kenneth Makate. And even in the
Not the inventor, but the originator.
The originator. And it was held in the High Court and has not been in dispute, and is even recognized in the Constitutional Court, that he actually originated the idea.
But it comes down to what an idea is worth. Because an idea unexecuted is ephemeral. It has no value whatsoever.
Indeed. But in his discussions with the product development director, he asked for a specific amount of a given quantum, being the turnover.
Has anybody ever corroborated that 15%?
Well, it was never denied.
Okay.
In fact, it went further than that, and Alan Craig referred to Mr. Makate as being greedy.
Okay. So, although 15% is nowhere in writing, it's never been it's never been confirmed, it's never been denied, which in law does that stand then as fact?
Well, in fact, the whole concept and origination was in dispute, because you'll recall that Alan Craig claimed originally that he had invented this.
There is a line in a book, second is nothing, which alludes to that fact. Yes, look what I invented, or words to that effect.
Indeed. And he held out that he had discussed it with the product development director, and it was at his behest that it was implemented.
We get so many stories like this where people claim to have come up with products, ideas, reward schemes, whatever the case might be. I had this idea first. I wrote a letter to the chief executive. They never bothered responding. And behold, 12 months later, my idea was on the street.
We have so many cases like that, people coming to us who can prove that they originated a particular concept or idea, and that the idea was then taken up by some giant enterprise and they were cut out. It seems to be a common phenomenon.
It is common. I mean, we can, anecdotally, lots of stories in South Africa. This is probably the biggest case in South Africa of this kind, potentially.
Indeed.
What is your expectation as you go into negotiations? I'm assuming you'll do the negotiation on behalf of Mr. Makate.
No, Mr. Makate will appoint a professional team who will then sit with Vodacom and discuss, come to some accord.
Okay, so, and again, if they agree on R1 million, you'll get a percentage of the million. If they agree on 100 million, you'll get the same percentage of 100 million. And if he gets $1 billion, you'll get the same percentage of $1 billion.
Indeed, that's precisely how.
What is that percentage?
It varies from case to case, and obviously in this matter we can't talk about that just yet until negotiations have been finalized.
Is it a good 25%? I mean, you take a lot of risk, a lot of time. You spend an awful lot of time.
No, lawyers work on a contingency fee agreement, which I believe restricts them to 25% or double their fee, whichever's the lesser.
Okay.
We're not subject to those sort of constraints. We take far greater risk. We fund matters all the way, in this case, up to the Constitutional Court. If we lose everything. And you're talking about millions and millions of rands. So our model is very, very different. As a ballpark figure, we'd take anything from 40 to 50%.
Okay, 40 to 50% of whatever gain is acquired there.
Indeed.
Okay, so I mean the negotiations, then you've got a massive vested interest in those negotiations. Do you have any say then as to who Mr. Makate appoints as his negotiators?
Well, obviously consultations would take place, and we'd be happy with whoever went in.
He says, my grand's a terribly good, she's very argumentative, I'll take her along. You might object to that.
Indeed.
I mean, he's a smart young guy, though, Mr. Makate. He understands what's at stake, and he's been remarkably sanguine about the process, making comments even like he respects Alan Craig. I thought he was very magnanimous in victory.
Indeed, and that's typical of his character. And I think he's astute enough to recognize that horses for courses. He'd appoint a professional team in order to enter to those negotiations.
Big numbers have been thrown around, in the billions of rand. Realistically?
Difficult to say. It really is. It would all depend very much on how much this product has earned. over the years.
Okay. And again, the 15% question is one that is going to be argued about extensively. As there is nothing in writing regarding the 15%, you can't hold Vodacom to that 15% in the negotiations.
That would certainly be the starting point, because that was precisely what was agreed and what Kenneth asked for up front, day one. So it would be difficult to...
What is the potential liability? I mean, clearly you've had a look at this. You've seen the best case scenario for yourselves and the worst case scenarios in your risk measurement as you went into this. What is the best case scenario?
In terms of reward?
Of reward.
Well, we hear figures bandied about. Alan Craig said this was the single most profitable enterprise that Vodacom had ever done. We hear figures of 54 billion turnover and even higher. But realistically, we'll have to see what is determined by the people, the professionals that go in.
What is your experience in South Africa in terms of settlements like this? Do you have any precedent to base it on?
No. The cases we've historically been involved in have had a predetermined quantum.
Okay.
We've known up front what it is that we are looking for, because the case, depending on who the defendant is, would have arisen out of a particular contract which had a predefined quantum. This is slightly unique from that point of view.
And timeframes?
The court ordered negotiations to commence within 30 days and to conclude within a reasonable time.
Again, this is what is reasonable and who's the reasonable person in the reasonable circumstances.
And I think that would be for the lawyers to determine.
So a lot of people are going to make a lot of money out of this settlement.
I'd imagine so.
Well, what an interesting case. My thanks to Errol Elsdon, who is director at Sterling Rand Litigation Fund. More money making and legal wrangling and battles and Davids versus Goliath into the future, no doubt. But the Constitutional Court has made its judgment, and now Vodacom has to pay back at least some of the money. Till next time, bye-bye.